What that made me think of, the idea, it was, oh goodness, who sang that song? Slow fade, Casting Crowns. The slow fade concept of you are at this point and it doesn't just drop off for you one day,
Yeah.
right? There are these slow, there are these moments where you kind of give yourself away piece by piece and you don't notice it's happening. It's just a slow fade. And then that makes me think that also there is this, because if you deal with an equalizer, like if you're talking about fading things, there
Yeah.
isn't just fading down, there's fading up too, right? So I imagine if um I don't know if you guys are aware of the concept of improving yourself incrementally over a time rather than attempting to be something that you're not instantaneously, right? Because one will cause you to just give up and say, I can't do that, right? So I
Yeah.
imagine if you're trying for this 1% improvement, this incremental change over time, and hoping that through prayer and time with God and relationship, that you will be transformed into what He wants you to be, and you're fading up, right? And
Mm.
you're working your way there. I think that takes care of a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, people's fear that they have to suddenly become something that they're not. There's
Mm.
all this pressure on them. They have to be perfect or whatever. I think He's there with a gift. He's offering us these things, but depending on how the gift is presented, depending on how we understand the narrative
Yeah.
of what's being presented to us, the whole thing's a process, right? But how we get started off is such an important part of that process.
Mm.
How do we get ministered to, or witnessed to rather, at the beginning? What's there with us, and then are we asking for God's help? Are we
Yeah.
asking for further insight? And I definitely feel like my life has been a very clear understanding of certain very specific components of this whole thing,
Yeah.
followed by very slow fade up, right?
Mm.
But not a daily fear that, like, I totally got that right at the beginning of the whole thing was, I'm gonna screw this up, right? I'm gonna do things, and the only way that I'm gonna be able to help other people and understand what this is by making sure they understand that I'm not perfect,
Yeah.
right? By making sure that they understand that I'm
Mhm.
very, very human, and here's my path, and here's what I've gone through, and here's this kind of slow fade up thing. And I had a pastor when I lived in Atlanta that lived and ministered exactly that way, right? He
Yeah.
Every time he would finish up with church or whatever, he would go to the places where there were, he was surrounded by people that were living, very sinful lives, and he was just opening up relationship with those people and listening and
Yeah.
being there with them. And he was criticized by everybody. What are you doing? Why are you going to talking to, you should be talking to the Christians. And he was like, why? Jesus wasn't talking to the Christians, right? Like, Jesus was talking to the people that needed him. What are you talking about? And they
Yeah.
were like, no, you need to be with the people that are already believers. Why are you going and talking to people that are not believers yet?
Yeah.
So I think no matter what we have as our understanding, if we don't get that base concept, so which is what's so valuable about what you're doing here, Jason, talking about this book, is this element. If we can really understand this, if we can wrap our heads around enough of it so that our hearts can be wrapped around it too, then maybe we've got a shot at this, right?
Yeah. And I think to a couple of things of what you said and what we've said earlier is, one, it's to tap into the source of transformation, which is and through Christ. And it's also to point people to him. And so perhaps some of the problem with that expectation is that we have pointed people to ourselves instead of to Christ, which has caused us to be more hypocritical because it
Yeah,
creates a weird power dynamic that shouldn't be there. I don't know.
man.
That's something
What you
to
just
think
said there,
through.
that could be an hour-long conversation in itself, at least, right? If the power dynamic is there because you are helping people tap into you, like, hey, I'm a great Christian, let me show you how to, like, you can
Yeah.
tap it,
And
like,
it may not even start that way, but if
right,
I can
right,
imagine, how easily I'm doing it for Jesus and pointing people to Jesus, but then I get some of the benefits that fall off of that. And you're like, oh, I like that. Let me get a little bit of more of that, and a little bit of more, and then before I know it, I'm hoarding that affection and that attention and that whatever you might kind of label it as.
Yeah, which is a very human reaction to a very divine process, right?
And it's almost like I can relate. Even Jesus does that in the sense that he's pointing people to the Father, not me, the Father. And I think on a few occasions that I can recall, he even says, like, don't call me good. It is only the Father that is good. And that's interesting to think that, wow, even Jesus did that. He modeled that for us.
Yeah.
And just things like that I see that seem to be ignored or overlooked or just maybe not prioritized. And
yeah.